We should stick together. Okay. Let me just make sure that I'm somewhat presentable. Okay, so I lied to you. I wasn't gonna record, but, and I don't know if I'll post this. Maybe I will. But I feel like for my own sake, I just need a little therapy sesh. My God. Life has been so crazy. I don't know. Sometimes I think I'm like, is my life feel crazy, or am I just like so overly emotional and sentimental all the time? Like, why must I be this way? But I am, and that's just a part of who I am, I guess. So basically I'm getting down to oh my God, I'm sorry. I have so many mosquito bites. It's driving me fucking crazy. But I leave Manila on Wednesday, and it is now Monday, so I have 2 days. And with Mercury in retrograde, and also just a full moon happened yesterday, the astrology girly in me is like, all right, bitch, like, yes, your emotions are all over the place because the planets are in the astrology is crazy, but also at the same time, I think it's just life. But yeah, I mean, I would say that I'm getting pretty emotional. My emotions are just like very up and down as of the last couple weeks. So for context, I left Los Angeles in March of 2023. Is it 2024 now? Yeah, it's 2024. So I left Los Angeles, and in some sorts of way, I felt like I was being forced to leave Los Angeles. So for those of you who don't know, which I'm sure most people know, the cost of living in Los Angeles is insane. And so I was having to like shell out like just for living expenses, like rent, groceries, car insurance, loans, debt, things like that. I had to make like a minimum of like $5,000 a month in order to pay my expenses. And in that time, and I've like briefly mentioned in the other episodes that I transitioned from like having like a full-time job into eventually freelancing. Well, I took time off and then I started freelancing. And anyone that's a freelancer knows that the money is never certain. And so, you know, contracts can last X amount of months or whatever. And thankfully, I'm very grateful that I have a client that is with me consistently. So, but again, it's, you know, working for yourself. And so, when I started freelancing, it just like wasn't enough to cover what my expenses were. I mean, I just had to find like several clients in order to keep up. And so, but at the same time, I knew that it was important for me to have like freedom with my time. I didn't want to work in an office job anymore. I didn't want to go to the office anymore. So that's why I started freelancing. And at the time, actually, I was living by myself, and I was just like the last few months that I was at my apartment, I like could barely make ends meet. And so I was like late on rent payments, and at that point, like I had like gotten like an eviction notice, like if you don't pay your rent by this amount of time, you have to get the fuck out. And so that was around, I want to say like December 20 or January 2023. And so I started to really think like, okay, this is just like not working out for me. And maybe I just need to leave, because I had been thinking about wanting to travel for years now. And so literally I decided, I remember I decided February. Um, and I remember I sat with this, like I didn't talk to anyone. And like, mind you, at this time, like I was very much in a mode of like self-isolating. I didn't really talk to a lot of people at that time. Um, but I made the decision that I was just going to move out. And so I emailed my landlord and I said, I'm moving out by March. And this was the beginning of February. So I chose, the shortest month of the year to get rid of all of my shit and get the fuck out of my apartment and then go and travel. So I had less than 28 days to sell all of my furniture, get rid of my clothes, and also like you realize when you have, and like I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment, right? So it wasn't even that big, but you realize how much shit you accumulate over the years, just like so much unnecessary things. And so I decided like that first week of February that I was going to leave. And I sat with it for a while and I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell like my parents, my brother. I didn't tell my friends. And I kind of, it like almost didn't feel real to me. And then actually one of my friends, and it's funny because I always put, I was like very strict on my do not disturb. So like my do not disturb would go on at like 8:30, 9 o'clock p.m. And I remember one night my friend called me and the call went through, which means like she must have called several times, because I think like if your phone's on do not disturb, like if someone calls you 3 times, it actually goes through. And she called and I think she was drunk, but she called me that night and I remember she just asked like, "Are you okay?" And then that's like when I told her, I was like, no, I'm not okay. I told my landlord I'm moving out. I decided that I'm going to go travel. So I need to get rid of all my shit and I'm leaving LA. And it was like the first time that I had said it out loud. And I feel like that conversation is kind of like what made it real. And then, she was the first person I told. And then the next few weeks was just such a whirlwind, because again, like anyone that hustles shit on like OfferUp or like Facebook Marketplace, I salute you, because that shit is just so draining. Like putting all your shit up for sale, and then you have to engage in 1,000 conversations in which like most of them are not even people who are like really interested. And then it's like having to figure out who's for real on who wants to buy your shit. And then it's like haggling on price, and then scheduling a time to either meet them to drop off the shit or have them come pick it up. It's like very stressful. And so, on top of trying to sell all of my shit and then also get rid of like all this stuff that I had, whether it was just like, because like I knew I was leaving the country. So I had to get rid of like my kitchenware, all of my groceries, my artwork. I had clothes, like, bro. When I started to get rid of my clothes, I realized that I had clothes from like high school that I had been holding on to. And in my mind, I was like, when I have kids, I'm going to pass these jeans on to them and they're going to be vintage. And like, I was holding on to like all this shit. Like, my closet was just absurd. Like, I had clothes from college, I had clothes from high school. It was just ridiculous. And then you realize that it was a hassle to have all of this bullshit with me. So I donated. So I remember I made several trips down to the Women's Center in Los Angeles. I donated like so much of my clothes, a lot of my kitchenware, like blankets, and just like pretty much everything. And when I say, like, when you make a decision like that and you just move towards what you really want to do, I absolutely believe that the universe, like once you make that decision and you go towards it, the universe will align everything else in place. And so even though I had like 3 weeks to fucking figure my life out, I somehow it just all worked out. Like I was able to like sell all of my big shit, like my big like furniture, and then and also like the people I know this is just so ridiculous of me, but I mean, I loved my apartment. I loved my apartment and I was so attached to my things that like I wanted to know that my things were going to good people. And so like the people that I actually sold my things to, I like all of them I got like really good vibes from. So I was like, oh, okay, I feel okay passing on my couch to you. Like and then I also like split up like some of my favorite things and like I left it with like some of my friends in Los Angeles. Um but yeah, everything just like ended up working out. And then I remember it was like such a busy 3 weeks. And not only just like the physical burden of all of it, like, sorry, excuse me, but the emotional part of it, like, I mean, I feel like it didn't like really hit me, but it was when I had those like moments of downtime that I was like leaving the country, but it actually didn't fully hit me until I actually left the country. But it was a lot. It was a lot to handle. And so anyways, it all figured itself out. And by the end of February, I was out of my apartment. And then I stayed like 10 days with my brother and I spent time with, I spent as much time as I could with the kids. And then I got the fuck out of there for, okay, so basically the goal or the idea was to travel Southeast Asia for 3 months. And then I was going to come back. And I didn't know where, that was what my dilemma was. I didn't know where I was going to come back to. I didn't know if it was going to be that I was going to come back to Los Angeles, or was I going to move back to Chicago, or was I just going to go to a different city altogether? I didn't know that. And so the goal for me was like, okay, I'll just figure it out as I start traveling. And I'll think about that later on like where I want to return to. And so the idea was that I was just going to travel for a few months and that I was going to come back in June. And and mind you, like I had already made plans with people in the US like for when I got back that summer. So every intention of returning. And I obviously didn't go back. So I traveled. I went to Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, and then I came to the Philippines. Um, and then I went to Singapore and Japan. But when I got to the Philippines, it was like very clear to me that I didn't want to go back to the US and that I wanted to stay in the Philippines. There was just something, I remember feeling it literally the day that I landed in Manila. I just felt so at home and I felt so happy to be here. And I just knew that I knew that I wasn't ready because I got to the Philippines in May and I immediately knew like I did not want to go back to the US in June. So I didn't know how long I wanted to stay here, but I knew that I didn't want to go back the following month, which was my original plan. And so I ended up staying in the Philippines. And for a while it was like, okay, well, I'll stay here until Christmas. I think that's like when I had decided. I was like, okay, I'll stay here till like the end of the year. And then towards the end of the year, I was like, I still don't want to go home. So I ended up getting a 6-month lease, and I got my own place. And so I didn't realize it at the time, but I felt like that 6 months was kind of a test run um, of living in Manila. And at the time, I think I was just looking at it as like, oh, I need to get back into a routine, because in LA, I just like really lived my life on routine. I'm very much so a routine person. And so I found my own routine, and I found like the communities that I wanted to be a part of. And I don't know, I really loved it. and then I started meeting friends, and I mean, before I knew it, I was like creating an actual life out here. And so the sentimental person that I am, I just feel, I don't know why, but I feel nervous about going back to the US. I mean, it's been like a year and a half since I've been to the US. It's been, I think, like 2 years since I've been back to Chicago. And so, yeah, I do feel nervous about going back. I feel sad about leaving Manila. And it's funny, I actually grabbed dinner with a friend last night. I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. Sorry. I grabbed dinner with a friend, and she asked me, I love that she asked me this question, because I feel like it needed to be spoken out loud, because it's been kind of like weighing in the back of my mind. Oh my God, I'm going to sneeze again. Excuse me. But she asked me, do you think once you get back to the US, you'll want to just like stay in the US? And I keep saying, I don't know why I feel worried. I don't know why. It seems silly, because obviously I can do whatever I want, but it has been like something that's been like weighing on my mind. And because here's the thing, I think it's because I know that I don't want to say I'm non-committal, but when it comes to like, based off of my track record, I realize that I can't say for sure, because when I left Chicago, I literally was like, I'm just going to go to LA for a couple months. And then I never moved back to Chicago. And then when I left LA, I was like, okay, I'll be back. I'm just going to travel for a few months. And then I never went back to LA. So, given my past track record, I feel like it's safe to assume that maybe I won't return. But I also feel like it feels a little bit different, because I think in the past, it's funny because I actually just watched, I'm a big tarot girly, and there's a tarot reader who actually just brought up this concept about how right now the focus should be that of like letting go of your past experiences and realizing that every experience, even though it seems similar to an old one, is its own unique experience. And it actually made me think about what I was saying about dating. It's like with every new relationship, you can't treat it like the old one, because everything is new. You're dealing with a new person, and you're moving forward differently. You yourself are a new person. And I feel like I also need to apply that to just life situations. And although it seems as if, given my past experiences of leaving cities, that I wouldn't come back, but I think also I feel a little bit different about it. I feel like when I left Los Angeles, I felt ready to leave Los Angeles. I felt like I had done all that I could there. I appreciated my time. I feel like I took good use of my time there. And it's not to say that I don't feel that way with Manila. I feel like I've made great use of my time here. But I also feel like there's still so much more that I want to explore, not even just in Manila, but in the Philippines in general. And so I feel like there is like unfinished business, I would say, with the Philippines, which is like why I feel like I will return. But then I also acknowledge that anything can happen and so much can change in just a month, a couple months. Like I'll be in the US for at least a few months. And so I can't say what will happen, but I do have every intention of coming back here. So there is like definitely this confusing feeling of, is this the last time I'm going to see Manila for right now? And is it going to be the last time that I see these people? And as much as I would like to say, like, I have every intention of returning, I understand that I could, it's a possibility that I could, that I don't return. So there is like this very, I don't know, sentimental like feeling for me about leaving. And then yeah, I guess just like feeling nervous about going back to the US, which sounds kind of silly, but I don't know. It's nervous, but it's like also excited. I feel I was just talking to my friend about how it's like returning back to where you came from, but coming back as a new person, because I feel like I have changed a lot. Um, so it'll just be interesting, I think, for me. Uh, but yeah, I don't know. So for anyone wondering what it's like to be abroad and then come back to the US after a while, I would say it's a little nerve-wracking, I guess, in a way. And I'm sure I to be honest, I feel like when I get there, I won't feel that way whatsoever. But there are some nerves, I guess. Um, and I think it's also just a combination of not really knowing where my life is taking me right now. I can't see that far into the future. Um, and I'm just kind of like blindly feeling it out. And but I also feel like I'm kind of used to that at this point. So yeah, that's kind of my check-in for right now. And I'm excited to see what happens when I get there. I'll probably maybe create another video at some point. And I will record with like friends, which I'm really excited about. But yeah, that's all I have. Cool.